The member Scarborough North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will be splitting my time with the member for Nepean. Madam Speaker, yesterday marks 1 month since recent acts of inhumane and barbaric violence erupted in Myanmar against the Rohingya Muslims, killing thousands of people and sending an estimated 480,000 civilians fleeing from their homes, neglected of their basic human rights. Many of them are especially vulnerable: children without parents, pregnant women, and victims of sexual and gender-based violence. They did not choose to leave their homes. There was no choice. This is in stark contrast to Rakhine State's once population of over 1 million Rohingya, who identified their roots among Western Myanmar's indigenous communities from over 1,000 years ago. Last Sunday, I heard from over 300 concerned residents gathered at the Islamic Foundation of Toronto in my riding of Scarborough North to discuss the dire circumstances faced by the Rohingya people. Joined by the members for Don Valley East, Don Valley West, Scarborough Centre, and Scarborough Rouge Park, I heard calls for an end to the violence and killing in Myanmar. Under the guise of rooting insurgents, Myanmar's military forces and extremists have engaged in what the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights calls, quote, a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. Going one step further, French President Emmanuel Macron has used the word genocide to describe the killing of innocent Rohingya victims, committing to work at the United Nations Security Council to condemn the horrific atrocities being committed. At last Sunday's meeting, a representative of Burma Task Force Canada encouraged our government to call it for what it is, a genocide, and to invoke the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. What I heard most clearly was the outrage being expressed by countless residents against the killing of innocent civilians. I heard calls for Canada to increase its humanitarian assistance with an aim to support a stable, safe, and inclusive Myanmar. The road to the unfortunate situation before us today has been long. For decades, the Rohingya people have been denied citizenship in their own country, thereby rendering them stateless. As one of the most persecuted minority groups in the world, they have endured decades of discrimination and injustice. It would be ignorant to say, Madam Speaker, that the recent massacre could not have been predicted or prevented. Our Prime Minister recently spoke to Myanmar's State Councillor, Aung San Suu Kyi, stressing her role as a moral and political leader. Our Prime Minister emphasized the need for an immediate end to the violence through the protection of civilians and access to United Nations and humanitarian partners. There is a moral obligation for Myanmar State Councillor and military leadership to address this humanitarian crisis in a responsive, collaborative, and compassionate way. All of this leaves us as global citizens who are deeply concerned. As Canadians, let us stand together as a nation committed to the inclusion, safety, and security of all peoples and the protection of human rights. Let us stand together as a nation calling on the authorities in Myanmar to take immediate and appropriate measures to end the senseless killing. Let us stand together as a nation prepared to support in these efforts. Canada has long championed peace, democracy, and humanitarianism all around the world. In 2015 to 2016, Canada contributed $27.47 million for development assistance in Myanmar through such organizations as the Joint Peace Fund, including $4.3 million in humanitarian aid for displaced peoples, including the Rohingya. This year, Canada has to date committed $9.18 million in humanitarian assistance to address the ongoing crisis in Myanmar. And last Sunday, I heard calls for Canada to do more. Concerned Canadians want to help through financial contributions to our partners in Bangladesh and Myanmar, and they are asking our government to match their donations dollar to dollar. They also want to help resettle Rohingya refugees into Canada, opening their hearts and offering their homes. First and foremost, Canadians want to see an immediate end to the violence. Some suggested the creation of a safety zone, while others spoke to their vision of peaceful resettlement in burnt-down villages. Canadians are reaching out, encouraging our government to continue to take a firm stand against the atrocities occurring in Myanmar. We must continue to work together with our partners in Bangladesh and Myanmar to protect civilians, provide humanitarian assistance, and strongly uphold the human rights of the Rohingya, who have been persecuted for far too long. This is not a local Rohingya Muslim issue. It is a matter that should concern every human being. As Canadians and as global citizens, we have an obligation to speak up against these atrocities against humanity and to stand together with our Rohingya brothers and sisters. Thank you.